Well, this is the first time we've met, and I'm not quite sure what sort of audience we're aiming for, what they're interested in. Life consists of many levels. Here's my physical body, which is sitting on a chair, an old man's body. And then there's my mind, what most people call the mind, the activity going on up here. But I'm sitting in this church, and this church is full of silence, isn't it? It's a sort of invisible background of silence. So if I was a little fish, this silence would be the ocean, wouldn't it? I'm swimming around in this ocean of silence. And if you were to address this question to the silence and say, "How are you this morning?" it would seem a bit silly, wouldn't it? Silence is silence, it's unchanging. Or stillness. Or even ask of the furniture, the old pews here. How are you today? It's meaningless, isn't it? And here in the middle of it all, we find this thing we call man, who's here today and gone tomorrow, always changing up and down. Unhappy one day, happy the next. Nothing's ever the same. Well, some of us in life, we start thinking, what's it all about? What are we? What is man? Well, I did as a young man. And so I gradually came to realize that I could observe my body and my thoughts from, as it were, outside. It's not so difficult, it's very easy to observe your hand, isn't it? Your body, you see it, just look at it. We look at ourselves in the mirror, don't we, every day? It takes a bit more tricky to observe the mind, but it can be done. You begin to sort of realise that this ever-changing performance isn't really what I am. It's just a sort of almost mechanical, robotic sort of reaction to the world around me. And certainly not something to be relied on or paid much attention to. So these questions, how are you, which has become such a habit in our present day society, I find slightly irritating because they pull me back into a world I've left behind, a sort of childishness. It's like asking a grown man about some, something that he did in the nursery. I've grown out of it, dear. You will too one day. Well, that's what this life is for, my dear. To find what real life is, life with a capital L and capital I-F-E too, real life. Not this sort of half-baked little thing we call life down here, which is little more than a robot, a puppet, just at the mercy of circumstances, here today and gone tomorrow. Feeling, how do you feel? You see how the question is so too small, dear. It's just too small. It's not it. It's not a real question. That's why it annoys me and I don't answer it. There you are. You've got an answer to your first question now, haven't you? Long way round, but we've got there eventually. So you meet lots and lots of opposition in this life, particularly from your nearest and dearest, your parents who think you should be responsible and make money and have a family and do everything according to convention. Well, those of us who take the unconventional path have many difficulties. It's much easier to be the same as everybody else. But that seems like being in prison. And some people just can't bear it. They have to go their own way. Well, to do that, you need courage, dear. Because it can be very frightening. I've got no easy answer, dear, how to cope with this life. Look at me now, I've got troubles with my own body. I don't know how. I have to learning all the time how to cope with it. I can't stand up properly. I always have to be holding on to something for support. I can't put my trousers on without having to sit down or lean against a wall or something so I don't fall over. But, we're learning all the time how to cope with life. It's difficult sometimes. It's almost always difficult. Well, our body has a temporary use, but only very temporary, isn't it? When I look back over my long life, it all seems almost nothing. It just seems rather like a dream. I've woken up from the dream. I mean, it seemed terribly important when I was living it, like a dream does. But when you wake up in the morning, the dream rather evaporates, doesn't it? So what's it for? What is the worth of life, at least of our mortal life? Well, it's a school, really. Why do we find ourselves in such a strange position when instinctively we know there's something missing? Why do we all yearn for what seems unattainable? Perfect love, perfect freedom. We don't want to die, do we? Look at the fuss people make about this virus, for example. People don't want to die, do they? They go to great lengths to try to stop themselves dying. As if anybody's ever stopped themselves dying. All you can do is postpone the day. Save yourself today to die tomorrow. But so people have always reached for the stars, haven't they, really? Search for something greater than this life. So maybe that's the purpose of life too. Search for the stars, my dear. Search for the ultimate. Search for perfection. Search for the love that never says no. For the door that never closes. Search for what your heart longs for. That's really the answer, dear. That's right. Follow your heart. That's what I did as a young man. If you'd asked me that question as a young man, I'd have said, what's this life for? To love and be loved. I thought that was the purpose of life. Then I'd have added freedom, to find freedom. I wasn't too sure what that meant then. And now I'm an old man, I might give much the same answer, I suppose. But of course the whole thing has expanded enormously. Because this life is so limited, isn't it? Look at my, I can have to walk with sticks now, I can only just sort of creep along. I can do very little. I lost most of my strength, my young man's strength. And yet, what happens when we go beyond this life? The infinite reaches out all around us, doesn't it? We are called to the infinite, the infinite. We are called from the finite to the infinite. From that which fails to that which faileth not. From mortality to immortality. From the small little me to with the infinite greatness. What can I do in this life? Little me. Of course, when I was a young man with strong muscles, I thought I could help the world. As a young farmer, I could do things on my little square of land. Seemed quite funny to me looking back. I suppose because as I've worked more in spirit, I've come into the infinitely greater work of prayer. What do I mean by prayer? Prayer is the raising of consciousness, the raising and expansion of how one sees life, from just what's in it for me, this little thing here, what's in it for me, a good meal and a hug and a kiss, to beyond the stars, what even the stars will do now, beyond the stars.